Hi, my name is Meier, and I want to welcome you to this sales training program about sales psychology and communication. Now, why is sales psychology so important? Well, sales psychology is not just for selling a product or service to a customer, but it's also important for personal interaction with other people in your life, in business, and in everything that you do. So when people say they want to be successful, really what it means, it's their ability to communicate effectively with other people. And there's a number of things that you can do, that you can learn, so you can improve your communication skills. And this video is all about that. This sales training program is not based in theory. It's a practical knowledge that I have acquired over the last 20 years of my career. And in my early career, I had over 3,000 face-to-face client meetings. And I can tell you exactly what I know and what worked and how human psychology and human behavior works so that you can apply some principles that will help you to become better at your sales process. Now, what's my story and why am I qualified to talk about this subject? Well, I got into sales when I was 20 years old. Today I'm 42, so over 22 years of sales experience. But when I got into sales in a sales job that was commission-based, so 100% commission. And at the age of 21, I was earning $10,000 per month. So for me as a young salesperson, that was a lot of money. And then I climbed up the ladder, became a team leader, and I became the #1 team leader of over 1,000 other team leaders that I competed against. And then obviously my career I grew, became a sales manager, and then eventually I built my own sales teams and I raised millions of dollars for companies, for products, mainly in the financial services industry. But I got so good at my job that my sales closing rate was between 80 and 90%, depending on whether or not the client was able to do something or not. And also, because I was so successful, I became a self-made millionaire in a very, very short period of time. Now, there are people who make $1 million in sales, and luckily I can count myself being part of that group. So whatever I have to teach you is very real, is very practical knowledge, and I hope you're going to enjoy this program. The first principle that I want to talk about is called LTNP. This means likability before trust, before need, before price. Now, what does that mean? Well, whenever we deal with other people, usually it's not exactly what we say, but it's how we say it. So 95% of our communication happens on a nonverbal level, which is our body language, the tone of our voice, intonation, the speed, the loudness, how we talk, and so forth. Now, obviously, we want to do business with people that we like. But here's the thing, it doesn't work any other way. So if you don't like the person that you're dealing with, and it's not a mutual likability, then you're not going to be able to sell anything. So the basis of every transaction is mutual likability. So, you can talk about small talk, about, being friendly, being nice, smiling, and so forth. So when you have established that initial rapport, so to speak, that's the basis for your conversation. So you need to start there. The second factor is called trust. You cannot sell to someone if they don't trust you. So trust is an important factor, which means obviously how you present yourself, how you look, your clothing, your hair, everything, and also obviously how competent you are. Now, if the other person, let's say, likes you and they trust you, but they don't see a need to do business with you, then you're not going to sell anything either. So the third factor is called need. So the client needs to have a need in order for you to be able to sell something to him. Now, how does he develop a need to sell something? Well, you need to create a deficit first. The deficit means that you make him aware of a problem, that he has some sort of a deficit or problem, something that's not okay. For example, when it comes to life insurance, you could say, well, if you don't take care of your life insurance right now, your family is going to suffer, and you describe in detail all the consequences and, with images and stories and so forth, how bad his situation would be to make him more sensitive or aware that he can develop this need that he says, oh, I really need life insurance, okay? So, likability before trust, before need. And then the last factor is price. Because let's say this pen here, I come to you and say, hey, buy this pen, buy this pen, buy this pen. And you say, no. It's because I haven't established the first 3 steps yet. Only when I say to you, buy this pen, it's, $5 or whatever, then you're open to buy the pen. Before that, you're not even going to consider it because the first 3 steps haven't been achieved. So remember, likability before trust, before need, and then you can talk about the price. Now, what's the goal of every successful communication? Obviously, you want the other person to do something, right? So when you say something, it doesn't mean that the other person has necessarily heard you, okay? And just because they heard you doesn't mean that they understood you. And just because they have understood you doesn't mean that they agree to what you have to say. And let's say even though they have agreed to what you say, that doesn't mean that they're ready to do it. And even though they're ready to do it right now, maybe they're not ready to stick with it in the long term. So even though you say, well, I just told him, doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to act on it. Okay, so that's why you need a series of control questions throughout your sales presentation so that you make it very clear what the next steps are. Now, communication is everything, and it matters how you say certain things, okay? So let's say if I tell you, I have something very interesting for you where you can make a lot of money. Are you available tonight? Let's meet on 1200 Main Street. Then you say, okay, sure, I'm open. But if you say, hey, are you available tonight? Let's meet on 1200 Main Street. It's just across from the cemetery. Then you get suspicious. You're like, oh, there's something wrong there. Or if you say, to a woman, for example, that's more of a joke. Every time I look into your eyes, time stands still, right? And then she's all like, oh my God, that's so romantic. Or if you say, when I see your face, every clock stops working, then, you basically insult her. So the way you say things matters. Or for example, if you're, religious and you go to church and you say, hey, am I permitted to smoke while I pray? And then, maybe your priest says, of course you are. Or am I permitted to pray while I smoke? So you see the difference? So it matters what we say, how we say it, where we say it. For example, if I'm in a jumpsuit, in a blue jumpsuit, and I'm full of oil because it just changed the oil in the car, and I go to you and I want to talk about financial products, well, it's not going to go over so well. Or if I want to talk to a client and I meet him in the bathroom while we're at the urinal, it's not the right place either, you see? So how you say it, what you say, the words you choose, all of that matters. There are a number of questions, and there are question techniques, and you need to know these questions. So let's start. There are closed questions, and closed questions are very simple. They're yes or no questions. For example, is your name Norman? The answer is yes or no, okay? And then there's open questions, and open questions start with how, what, who, where, or why. And these questions will give you some information. And it's important for you to use a lot of open questions when you talk to someone. For example, what did you do after you got up this morning? So then he will tell you, well, I got up, I ate breakfast, I took a shower. So you get some information which can help you, which you can maybe use later in your sales process. And then there's questions with 2 options. For example, you give him a choice of 2 options. When you say, well, would you like to have the blue car or the red car? So you don't even ask whether he wants to buy the car, you say, which color do you want? And then he's thinking, oh, blue or red, not yes or no, you see? And then there's hypothetical questions. And hypothetical questions are things where you open him up for new ideas. For example, assuming I would be able to show you how you could double your money or your income in the next 12 months, Would you give me 5 minutes of your time? And he says, yes, of course. Or imagine there were a better product than the one that you're currently using. Would you even be open to listen, to this proposal? Of course I would. You see? So you open him up with hypothetical questions. And then obviously there are rhetorical questions. And those things are like, you don't like to pay taxes, do you? Right? Or, who likes to pay taxes, for example? And then there are suggestive questions where you imply something. For example, you definitely want to do something about those raising taxes, don't you? And of course someone says, yeah, of course I want to do something about that. So where you basically suggest the answer into him, where you already know what he's going to say. And then one of the questions are the control questions. The control questions are very important. For example, everything that I've talked about so far, has this been clear? Yes. Or did you understand the importance of this particular point that we just talked about? Yes. Does everything make sense so far? Yes. So it's important to get a few yeses along the way. And then finally, counter questions. And counter questions are things like, how do you mean? Or what exactly do you mean by, this and that? And there's also a technique, it's called the parrot technique. And the parrot technique is repeating the last few words or the last word of the question that you've been asked, let's say, assuming you don't know the answer. So let's say someone says to you, well, are you dealing in derivatives? And let's say you have no idea what derivatives are. Then you say, derivatives? What exactly do you mean? Or how do you mean it? And then he gives you the answer. He says, well, it's options and futures and so forth. And then you can say, oh, no. We're not dealing in the derivatives. So you see? So without having to admit that you don't know the answer, you use the parrot technique by trying to clarify the question by basically giving it back to him and repeating the last word of what he said. One of the most important factors in sales is curiosity, okay? So people are curious like hell, okay? The cat is not the most curious animal in the world, it's the human, okay? So remember that. So whatever you do in your sales presentations and so forth, don't give everything right now. Why? Because let's say you explain something, you build it up, and then he says, oh, what is it? Boom, and then he's down here with his interest. So that's why you want to make sure you build something up, and up here you ask a question or you take the next step or you make a new meeting, but you need to have him always excited and curious, okay? Because he wants to move forward. Now, for example, when you're dealing with objections, okay, as I said before, how do you start? You start with praise and recognition. So someone says, oh, I don't like this, I have no interest or whatever. You can say, well, thank you very much for bringing this up. I understand how you must feel, so expression of understanding. And then a new question where you can say, well, assuming I had something that was the same price as what you're paying right now, but was better in this and this and this respect, would you be open to listen to it? And then he's like, okay, sure. Or you could add the question at the end. It's called, does that sound fair? Okay. So you could say something like, I totally understand that you have no interest at this point. That's normal. If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have any interest either. But I would suggest that I send you some general information for you to look at. And once you've seen that, you can decide whether or not you would be open to listen to me. Does that sound fair? Yes. Because the question, does that sound fair? Of course he has to say yes, because the proposal as such is fair. So there's no other option possible than saying yes. Okay, so it's not really a trick question, but it pushes him to say yes. So the thing is that you want to open up the client, because usually people are closed, they're not open, they're not ready to buy. Objections are normal, okay, and you should open up to objections. You should open up the client by using those questions. Now the next part is called praise and recognition. There are only two things in this world that people want more than sex and money, and this is praise and recognition. And even Napoleon said, people will die for ribbons. And it's so important because people are starving for attention and starving for recognition. So you have to give it to them. And here's a formula, and I want to write it down because it's so important, that I use. And it starts with number one, you have praise and recognition. For example, that you use. And then the next point is called expression of understanding. And finally, the third part is like a new question. Okay, and I'm going to give you a couple examples from that. Huh? All right. So, number one. Well, that's an interesting question. Thank you very much for mentioning this. Or you could say, oh, it's great that you mentioned that. Most people would never do this. Or expression of understanding. I can really understand how you feel. I feel the same. Or I appreciate your honesty with me. Or I'm not surprised that someone like you has so little time. Or, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Or I really feel for you. So you see, so those expressions of understanding are very important. So you start with praise. You say, hey, thank you very much for giving me this question or this objection. Not many people would point this out. Number two, I can understand how you feel. If I were in your shoes, I would feel the same. And then the third is the new question is, well, assuming I had a solution for you, would you be open to listen? And then the answer is yes. When you're getting an objection, you have to understand the most important thing is to stay positive because most people don't want to buy anything at first. And an objection is nothing else but a question, really. So if someone has some general interest, there's going to be some objections. But if there's no objections, then there's no interest, okay? So that's why you should welcome objections and be happy for objections. Now, when you get an objection, ask yourself, what does that really mean? What does he mean by his objection? So you need to read between the lines and understand what the real issue is. So if he says, oh, I have no interest, I have no money, I have no time. So if he says, oh, I have no money, maybe that's BS. Maybe he does have the money, but he's scared. So you need to realize, okay, the objection, I have no money, is not the real objection. The real objection is, I'm scared, I don't trust you, I'm not sure. So you need to address that, okay? So read between the lines, ask yourself, what is the objection? And every time you get an objection, be happy, be open, be positive. Don't be like, oh, I'm getting objection, oh no, it's over. It's not over, that's the beginning. Now, when you're dealing with a conflict or you have an argument with someone, now let's draw, and I'm not the best drawer in the world, okay? So let's say this is you here, and here is the other person, huh? Okay, so now you're talking or you're communicating, and obviously you're communicating and on 95% on a non-verbal level and 5% on a verbal level, okay? So keep that in mind. Now, imagine this, okay? We have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind, I call it, it's like the Neanderthal. The Neanderthal is not very smart, he's very stupid, it's only based in emotion, okay? So let's say you have on your back, you have this big Neanderthal who's sitting there, and so does the client. So both of you have like a big, and this guy here, this Neanderthal, is much stronger, much more powerful, he has much more influence. He's not very smart, but he's very emotional, okay? So what you need to do, you need to win the other person's Neanderthal, okay? That's how you build his trust, that's how you get ahead. And if you act, and you only say facts, and you give him all the reasons and arguments, that might not be enough. You need to get him on an emotional level because it's 95% the decision maker. Okay? So also when you're talking to someone, okay, and you say, oh, for example, you're standing at two different locations, and one person says, I see the ocean. The other person says, no, I see the mountains. And he says, no, I see the ocean and I see the mountains. And you keep having a conflict and you're not agreeing anything. So obviously then you're not getting anywhere. So what you need to do, you need to basically take yourself, go to the other side of the other person and say, yes, when I look at it from your point of view and I see it from your point of view, yes, I can see the ocean. But why don't we both check it out from my point of view? Then you can see the mountains. Okay, so basically you need to first take his position, say, yes, I can see it from your point of view. I see what you mean. I understand you. And then once you have basically agreed, then you can get him to move over to your side or to your point of view, where then he can agree to what you have to offer him. So you see, it's important to do it emotionally. You can't have a conflict, and you need to win the neanderthal. Let's talk about making phone calls, because making phone calls is key when you're a salesperson, because you need to set up meetings, you need to deal with clients, and the phone is a very, very important tool that you need to be able to use so you can make sales. So here's an important thing. The reason why most people are not good at prospecting is because of fear of rejection. And because of that fear, they don't like it. And because they don't like it, they're not really getting better at it. Okay, so here's my message to you. If you have certain fears, if you're not comfortable with the phone, you need to make cold calling or using the phone in general your strength. Okay, so you need to work on it. You need to read things. You need to talk to your friends. You need to learn about objections. You need to do everything you can to become better at prospecting. And once it becomes a strength of yours, you're going to be much better at it. You're going to be much happier, and you're going to perform better. Okay, so something that is maybe a weakness right now, or something it's standing in your way of your success, needs to become your strength. Okay, that's number one. And then number two, when you look at making calls, obviously not making any calls means getting a no, which means you've already lost. Okay, so getting a no basically from a client is much better, because eventually you're going to get more yeses, and you cannot lose what you never had. So you need to do the work. You need to make the calls in order to be successful. Okay, and there's a whole other training session on this, but in general, just remember, okay, prospecting or making phone calls should become your strength, and you need to work on it, and you need to face your fears, and that's how you get ahead. Now, what's the main objective of making a telephone call? Well, it depends on what kind of business you're in and how your business works. But in general, let's say you're setting up client meetings where you actually go and meet the client face to face. So then don't try to sell anything on your first call. Okay, don't try to convince him. Don't try to win the argument or something like that. It's pointless. Okay, so the main goal of your phone call is only one thing, is to get the appointment and nothing else. Okay, to get him to say yes, to agree to meet with you. Everything else is secondary, and everything else is done in the meeting, in the face-to-face meeting, and you can do it there much, much better. So don't try to put too much pressure on yourself by trying to convince him to buy the product over the phone. Okay, no, just get him to agree to a meeting. Let's talk a little bit more about objections. So if someone says to you, I'm not interested, what does that really mean? It means that the client doesn't know you yet. He doesn't trust you yet. And maybe you haven't either created enough curiosity, or he's still afraid somewhat. So in that case, you shouldn't push him too much, because what does it mean to be not interested? It means that you need to give him more information. Okay, you need to make him feel better. Okay, because if he knew what you know, he wouldn't hesitate. Agreed? So, okay, so put yourself into the shoes of the client. So you can say stuff like, I can understand at this point that you're not interested, because that's normal. Because you don't know exactly what I have to offer to you. Now, let me make a suggestion. Why don't we have a short meeting, and I can explain to you a little bit more in detail what it is exactly that I have to offer and how it works, with documents. And then you can still decide whether or not this is of interest to you. Does that sound fair? And then he's going to say, yes, of course. Or if he says, for example, oh, I have no money. Well, either the client has no money, and then you say, okay, thank you very much, goodbye, or he is afraid, okay? So if that's the case, obviously the level of trust hasn't been established enough. So then you can say something like, well, thank you for being so honest with me. Well, let me make a suggestion. And then you do the same thing. You say, oh, let's meet. And if you like what I have to offer, then, we can proceed. If not, then we just had a nice cup of coffee together and shook hands and no harm done. Okay, does that sound fair? Yes, it does. Okay. Or if he says, oh, I have no time. Well, what does that really mean? It doesn't mean he has no time, because everybody has time. Just it's the priority because he doesn't see the benefit yet or of your meeting. So he thinks it's maybe a time waster, or it's not necessary because he doesn't see the need. So therefore, you need to say something like this. You could say, well, I'm not surprised that someone like you is very busy and has very little time. And obviously, you will only take time out of your busy schedule if it's really something worthwhile, correct? He says, yes, of course. Well, then I assume that you would be only interested in very short conversation. Am I right? Yes. Well, then I suggest let's just meet for 15 minutes and I show you exactly what I have to offer. And after 15 minutes, you can throw me out the door if that's okay with you. And you can still decide whether or not you want to spend some more time or invest more time into our process. Is that a fair suggestion? Yes. Okay. So when I say 15 minutes, obviously, it's never 15 minutes. When you get there, sometimes it ends up being a couple hours, okay? But you tell him 15 minutes because the threshold to agree to 15 minutes is not very much, okay? Now, the next thing is when he says, well, how does that work exactly? And what do you do in detail and so forth? And if at that point you give him all the information, well, we do this, and he says, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not interested. So you need to keep him curious. You need to say something like, well, that's the good part. And once we sit down and I can show you exactly what I have to offer, you will see that I can double your income. You can see how I can save you taxes. You can see how I can do this. So don't give him the info, because this will kill the sale and he will say, oh, okay, sorry, I have no interest. Keep the curiosity level high. Or, for example, if he says, well, I lost money before, that means basically he's afraid to make another mistake. So therefore, you need to obviously have, again, praise, recognition, expression of understanding. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure the person that back then didn't do it on purpose. Well, look, in our case, it's a little bit different, blah, blah, blah. This is what I suggest. Why don't we meet for 15 minutes and I show you exactly with proof, with papers and so forth, what we do, how we do it. And if you like what you see, then you can decide whether or not you want to proceed and spend more time. And if not, then, we just met for 15 minutes, no harm done. Does that sound fair? Yes. Okay, so the goal or the objective is not to try to convince him to show, because at this point you don't have all the info or the possibilities to prove to him that you're an honest business person. No, at this point, all you want to do is get the meeting, get it face to face, and then at the meeting, you can do your work. Well, when it comes to dealing with clients, with people in general, if it's at home with your wife or your husband, if it's with your family, if it's at work with your job, whoever it is, whatever you do has to do with emotional intelligence and relationships, okay? And all top salespeople are, without exception, experts in building relationships. And here's the thing, if you focus on the product, you will not sell the product, okay? Because if you fail to focus on the relationship, then you're not going to be able to make a sale. So first is the relationship. You need to focus on the relationship, and then your product will basically sell automatically, okay? Because the product is just the icing of the cake. So that's really detail, so to speak. Number one is you focus on the relationship rather than the product, and then you're going to get the sale. When it comes to improving your communication skills, I want to encourage you to read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Okay, this book has changed my life and has changed thousands of salespeople that I know, that I've worked with, that I've dealt with, and everybody who read the book improved their sales tremendously. And why is that? Because we focus on the relationship, okay? And in this book, and the book is actually a classic, it was written in like the 1930s, it will teach you the basics of communication. So I encourage you, if you don't do anything else but read that book, you will do much better in sales. The next thing I want to encourage you to do is study NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And why is that important? Because NLP is important to build rapport with your clients, okay? Because as I said at the beginning, you need the likability factor and trust in order to build that rapport. And rapport basically means building trust. So how do you do that? Well, there's a certain amount of techniques that you can use. For example, mirroring his body language. Okay, if you, let's say you come in your blue suit and you're all, tense, and you go to see a farmer and the farmer looks at you and he says, well, that looks like an alien. It's like, but then you take off your tie and say, oh, finally I'm able to, move close freely and so forth. Then you are able to be on the same level like the other person. Okay, so because we tend to like people that are similar like us. Okay, so the similarities are important. So the way you move, the way you talk, let's say someone talks really fast, then you should also talk faster. If someone talks really slowly and relaxed, then you should also adjust your voice, okay? So however you deal with your client, you need to mirror your client, you need to adjust to his personality and to his tone of voice and so forth. And that's when he's going to automatically trust you more, when you build the rapport and your relationship in general will improve. And that's what you need to make a sale. Now, if you deal with a completely new person, usually they say to you, why should I listen to you? Okay? And the question, why should I listen to you? What's in it for me? Is usually the number one question that someone has. Why should I listen to you? What's in it for me? That's what interests people. Otherwise, they have no need to listen to you. So whenever you talk in person or you have a sales letter or whatever, answer the following questions. Number one, why should I listen to you? Number two, what is it and what can you do? Number three, who else has bought it? Number four, who says so except you? And number five, what's in it for me? Then the next thing you should be aware of is that people have two major motivations. There's only two main motivations that people really have. Number one is to gain pleasure or to avoid pain. Okay, and if you focus on those two motivations, you will be able to get motivated to buy your product. Now, to avoid pain is usually the stronger motivation, because if you say, oh yeah, if you buy this product, you're going to have this, you're going to have more money, you're going to feel happy and so forth. Well, that's all nice and dandy, but more important is to avoid pain, to avoid problems. Okay, that's where people have a need to act. Okay, so whatever you say, however you say it, think about what kind of problems could you make the client aware of so that he wants to change his situation and obviously act on it and then buy your product. Another principle in sales that I want to use is a three-step principle. Okay, number one is when you talk to someone and you say, oh, everybody can buy this product, it's for everyone, you can have it, he can have it, it doesn't make the product special. So you need to make the product special, or you need to make it rare, okay? So you need to make it rare, like, there's only a limited number of, products, and if you don't act now, it's gonna be gone, okay? Or I only have this many numbers available, and if you don't buy it now, it'll be sold out by Saturday, okay? So you need to make the product rare, you need to make it special. Then number two is contrast principle. And the contrast principle goes like this. For example, you could say, this product usually costs $100. And he says, wow, $100? Yes, but today, and only till tomorrow morning, I can give it to you for $20 only. And now $20 sounds like a deal. It sounds cheap. And he says, oh wow, really? For $20 only? Yes, but you need to act now. And here's the third thing, which is time pressure. And if you don't give me the answer till tonight or till tomorrow morning, whatever, within 24 hours basically, then he doesn't act on it. And why is that? Okay, here's the thing. Let's say you make a sales presentation and you talk to someone for like an hour, 2 hours, and you explain everything, and his motivation is at 95%, okay, or 100%. And he's basically ready to buy, or maybe there's one thing he wants to think about. Now, if you say, okay, let me know in the next 2 weeks, what happens? Well, his motivation will slowly go down. The next day, it's only at 50%. A week later, it's at 10%. He doesn't remember all the details anymore. He doesn't remember what you talked about. His emotion is at 0. So you build him up, you made him excited, and then it's down. So whenever you want to sell something, you need to always use these 3 principles. You need to make it rare. You need to do something with the price that you can only do on a limited time basis. And you need to say, you need to act now. It's time pressure. And only then, if you use time pressure, you'll be able to make a sale. Otherwise, you'll lose the client anyway. When it comes to making decisions, okay, we humans, we are like robots, okay, because we use a program in 95% of the cases each time we make a decision. And that program or that program structure looks always the same. So there is a number of behavioral patterns that we use when we make a buying decision. Now, let me give you an example here, okay? Have you ever lost your keys, your house keys? And remember what you did in that situation, okay? So you first looked in the places where you would normally put the keys, right? So you look, let's say, in the kitchen, you look in your jacket, you look in the drawer, you look wherever you are, and then you still can't find your keys. What do? Here's the interesting thing. You start looking again in the kitchen, in the drawer, in your pocket, at the same time. And sometimes you do it 3 or 4 times, exactly in the same spots and location. And it's really stupid when you think about it, because you just checked and it wasn't there. But you keep repeating and doing the same pattern. And you know what? It's the same when we do buying decisions, okay? Now, pattern number 1 I want to talk about is this. There's 3 ways how people make a decision. Number 1 is they make the decision themselves. Okay, so the client makes the decision themselves. Number 2, they are influenced what others say, or what the others say about it. Or number 3 is they do it based on information. So let's say there's someone, let's say more dominant. He says, you know what, I'm going to decide right now. Okay, yes, I like it. I'll do it. Okay. But then there's other people who maybe need to hear testimonials, need to hear what others have to say. Maybe need to talk to their wife, and the wife has to first agree to it, and then they're able to do the decision. And number 3, someone says, well, it's all nice and cool what you tell me right now, and but give me the details, give me the blueprint, the fine print, give me all the facts and figures, and then I can make a decision. So some people need the figures to make a decision. They just don't take your words for it. Some people need to get the opinion of others because they don't want to look stupid, and the other person can just make the decision because they want to make the decision themselves. Then the next pattern is people who say, for example, 80% of people will do a decision or make a decision because it's similar to what they have had in the past or done in the past. Okay, and because we're all creatures of habit, okay? And if you were, for example, buy, let's say, a sofa, chances are you're going to buy a similar sofa in the future, okay? But there's people, okay, I call them polarity responders, which means they will do the opposite of whatever you say, okay? And they're very difficult to deal with. And you have to kind of recognize what kind of person you're dealing with, because sometimes a person will always say yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. You know, you give him an argument, he says, yes, that's true, but da 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 da. And then you give him the argument, he says, yes, but da da da. So whenever you get that yes, but person, so someone who's always trying to do the opposite, it's a little bit difficult, but you need to then have the courage to say, you know, this product is all great and so forth, but I don't really think you can afford it. I really think this is for you. And then he says, no, 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 yes, but I can do it. And then he sells it to himself, because you have to take away the product from that person. You have to basically give him reasons why he shouldn't have it. And then he will give you the reasons why he wants to have it. Okay. So once you get that person, the yes, but person, you need to work on that. And then there's people who you need to just give them a general overview and they say, okay, great, let's do it. But then there's people who need details. Okay. So you have the general person and you have the details. Then there's people who are focused on the past. Well, in the past, we always done this and we want to do something similar. Or there's people who are focused on the future, where you say, well, we have the option now to completely, you know, get something new, double your income in the future. So, you know, make a better performance, blah, 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 blah. So you have to figure out, is the person focused on the past or is he focused on the future? And then the next one is he trying to avoid a problem, or is he focused on goal orientation? Okay, so that's another factor you need to figure out. And is his manner of how he deals with you, is it structured or is it random? Which means, is he someone who says, well, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then finally I can make a decision. So does he need to have that structure? And if yes, you need to do that structure. You need to follow that structure. If he's not structured, well, then you can move forward. And then finally, we have cost, time, or quality. Because some people are focused on the price, on cost, no matter what. Some people are focused on quality. They are willing to pay more money. And some people say, look, I need it quickly. I need the speed. Otherwise, I won't be able to have it. So you need to figure out what's important to your client. Does he want cost? Does he want speed? Or does he want quality? And finally, is he visually oriented? You can say, see when he says, oh, this looks good. Oh, I can see that. Or if I look at it from this point of view, then, so you know he's visually oriented. And then you can use lots of things like, you know, look at this, or look at, you know, check this out. Or is he auditive, which means, does he listen? Does he need to hear it? Okay, so he says, oh, that sounds good, yeah. Or I've heard that, you know, he talks like that. Or please tell me. So if you use a lot of those expressions, you need to also use those expressions. Or is he someone who's kinesthetic? For example, does it feel good? When he says, oh, I have a good feeling about this, or I can feel this, then what you need to do, let's say you're selling a car, right? So if he's kinesthetic, which means he is, focused on how he feels, you need to let him drive the car. You need to sit in the car with him. You need to let him touch the car, basically. And then he's going to be motivated. But if he's visual, you need to show him pictures. You need to show him how it looks and so forth. Or auditive, turn on the engine and just boom, boom, boom. Then he can hear it. So depending on that pattern, people have different motivations. So find out what his patterns are. Use that information, maybe in a first conversation, so you understand how he makes his decisions. And then in your actual sales presentation, you can use his patterns and make sure you get the sale. In general, okay, people are way too complicated with whatever they explain or how they say things. So there's a formula, it's called KISS. Keep it simple and stupid, okay? Because the average person is stupid. The average person is not smart, okay? So the more, let's say, complicated you explain something, the less likely he will understand what you're talking about, and he will get confused. So KISS, the formula KISS, keep it simple and stupid, should be what you're using almost every time. And the next thing is credibility. Now, think about it this way. If you go, let's say you have a brain tumor and you want to get a brain surgery, what do? Do you go to the general practitioner, or you go to the specialist who does 2 brain surgeries a day? Well, obviously you want to go to the specialist. So therefore, it's the same in your field. Whatever field you're in, you want to be the specialist, okay? Because people want to deal with the best, they want to deal with the specialist, okay? So that's why you need to position yourself as the specialist. And sometimes, in order to get more credibility, what you need to do, for example, I talked about keeping it simple before, so you do everything very simple, but then for a minute, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, just for a short period of time, you bring out the jargon, you bring out the technical stuff, you talk about blah, 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 blah. You say, okay, if you want to do, this investment, then what I suggest is you do use a top-down approach, blah, 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 and you explain everything like in a very complicated manner for a minute or 2 only. Why is that? Well, the client will say, wow, I have no idea what he just explained to me because it was all technical jargon, but I have the feeling that he knows what he's talking about and he is the specialist. And that's all you need to do. So you just want to position yourself as the absolute professional specialist in your field. And that's why for a minute or 2, you talk a little bit more complicated, a little bit technical. And as soon as he gets the feeling that he can trust you because you are such a specialist, then that's all you want to do, okay? And that's going to help you. Well, as I said before, 95% of all our decisions are based on emotions. They're made on an emotional level. That's why you want to use lots of words, lots of stories, lots of emotions and pictures that trigger emotions. Sometimes in order to get someone to motivate, to take action, sometimes you need to paint a really dark picture, which means you need to make him aware of a problem. So you could say, well, what would happen if you didn't buy the life insurance? You died. What would that mean for your wife? Would you have to move out of this big house into a small, dark apartment where there's only one table and, one piece of bread on the table? And then there's a mouse walking by because it's so cheap. And what about your children? They would live in an area where there's crime and problems and so forth. So you paint this picture and he's like, oh my God, no. I want to avoid that. Okay, I want to avoid that. And the solution is, let's say your life insurance is your product. So use pictures, make it emotional so that he has a reason to act. Well, what does it mean to be a successful salesperson? Well, it means really that you are a good psychologist, which means that you understand what the other person thinks and how they feel in any given moment. So every time you talk to a person, basically, whatever you say, your arguments, your presentation, everything, all these things is something that you should have basically down to a T. So you should really not worry about your presentation, forgetting, that's it doesn't even matter. What matters is the other person. So you focus your attention on the other person, how he feels, how he reacts, what is his suggestion, his objection, and then you sense or you feel him, and based on that, you can steer the conversation into the right direction. Okay, so you need to become a great psychologist. You need to try to use your sixth sense, so to speak, to see why is he saying that. What does he What does he mean by that? What is his motivation? What is his fear? Why might he be hesitant? So once you have that kind of feeling and you understand what's really going on, that's when you can act accordingly. So learn everything about that topic. When it comes to sales, remember that if you don't have the fire in you, you can't expect to get the spark in the other person. So you need to have the fire within you. You need to have your own motivation. You need to be excited about your company's product. You need to be excited about what you're selling, about your process and so forth. And that's why you need to really look at your products at your company, at the competition, and really say, we have the best products. And once you have that fire in you, that excitement, your client will sense that, okay? They're not stupid, they will sense it. If you're not convinced yourself, you cannot convince anybody else. If you're not 100% sure that what you have to say and offer is great, you will not make the sale. So that is key too. So ask yourself, what is my attitude? And sometimes it doesn't matter whether your sales script is perfect, whether you handle objections the right way. And so it's all details. Important is, do you have the fire in you? Do you have the excitement in you? And even if you're not 100% perfect in everything that you do, your client will sense it. And with that, you will make the sale anyway, okay? So look at yourself, look at your motivation, and decide that from now on, you're going to be excited and find the reasons, set your personal goals and so forth, and decide to become the best.